That's fine. So it's going to be 8, you said?
18.
18, that's right.
Yes, 17, 18, 15.
Oh, 15 to 18? Okay, perfect. Whatever.
I'm sure.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. I mean, we can do whatever we want. So, question 15. Question 15. Nationwide Bank has approached Hometown Bank with a proposal to merge. Oh, sorry, I got to start doing this again. That way you guys don't have to deal with me. So Nationwide Bank and Hometown Bank approached with a proposal to merge. The following table lists this. So the following table lists the sales of the banks in the area. Use the information to calculate the 4-firm concentration ratio and the Hirschman index. Based on this information and the horizontal merger guidelines, do you think the Justice Department would challenge the merger? So let's get at it. So first of all, the table. We did a similar one. We did a very similar one, but we didn't do the one with banks specifically. So here's the table, right? It already sorts it in descending order. How kind of them. I don't know if the test always does. So just be careful, right? Don't take the first top 4 and think that they're going to be the highest concentration. Double check. But it gives us all of the banks in the area, and we're just going to use the top 4 for the C4, but then we're going to use all of the information for the HHI, right? So I don't really feel like doing this by hand, so let's just do it in Excel. So so I don't really want to do the names since that doesn't matter. I'm just going to do the, really going to be like that. What'd you say?
Okay.
Right, so we just need the first 4 for the first one, right? So this is sales in million. All right, so this is going to be, put it in C, right? C4 is going to be equal to, and so it's going to be this one plus this one plus this one plus this one, right? A2 plus A5. I guess we could also do sum A2 for A5 if we really wanted to, but and then all of that, it's going to be divided by the total of all of them, right? So here's where I'll use sum, and then I'll just click and drag, which will make a colon between A2 and A10, so that tells me that's the range on which I want to summation. Wait, document. Oh, won't let me do it while I'm. Yep. Okay, cool. So this is our C4, right? 0.66. Questions on that? We could always, if we want, just sum this over here underneath, right? Maybe put a double line or something there, and then instead of having to do the sum on the bottom, we can just divide by that cell, and it's going to give us the same answer, right? So now a little bit harder, the HHI, right? The HHI is going to be 10,000 times, and so this is so we'll do brackets, and then open parentheses, the first one divided by the total squared. Thank you, G. And then, because I'm lazy, I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it, 10 times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Well, to have 10 total, right? And then I'm just going to change the A3 to be A5, A6, A7, A8, A9, A10. All right, G, you're right. Okay, is that what you wanted to hear? Making me get rid of the square brackets. Yeah, something like square brackets. I like the differentiation. Okay. So we end up with an HHI of 1403. So this is our pre-merger HHI, right? So remember, we're asked Nationwide Bank and Hometown Bank, Nationwide and Hometown, right? We're asked what if they merged? What would happen to with the DOJ care? Would they get in the way of it, right? So we need to figure out the new HHI. So this is HHI before merger, and then I will copy this, paste it down here, so that we can let's go ahead and combine Nationwide and Hometown. So Nationwide is the 845. So this is going to be equal to 845 plus Hometown is the 260, right? 260. And then I'm going to delete this 260, and I'm going to move this guy up just because it looks better. And we end up summing all of them and getting 553 as the sum of all of them. So do we care about the C4? No, not when we're talking about mergers. We only care about the HHI. So we can just dip out and not do the C4 for this one, right? So the HHI after the merger is going to be, and so the cool thing about this is we can just copy this and paste it over here. And it gives us a value error because it's trying to reference an empty cell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this right here. So I need to copy it to the same one. So this was at 665. So this is at 665. And so it ends up looking at A16 divided by A26 squared plus A17 divided by A26 squared, so on and so forth. We just need to delete this last term because there's no longer an A24, right? A24 is missing since there's only 9 firms in the industry. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. Press enter. Bada bang, bada boom. We got an HHI of 1546 now. Right. So it may be, but it's probably acceptable. They're probably going to look at other things like are there significant barriers to entry? Are the economies of scale of the current behemoths driving the cost so low that nobody can compete in the industry if this happens, right? But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's going to pass the test. They're still going to look at the other things, but yeah, it's going to be acceptable. Questions on that? Okay, sweet. Should be some fairly easy points on these. So let's take a look at 16. Just walk through it. So fiat. Fiat recently entered into agreement to merge with Case for 4.3 prior to the merger. Market for four-wheel drive tractors was 5 firms, highly concentrated with an HHI of 2,765, right, which is above our limit of 2,500. The market share was 22%, while Fiat comprised just 12%. If approved, by how much would the post-merger HHI increase? And then based only on this information, do you think that they would challenge the merger or not? So let's try to do this on our own. So let's turn on our brains. So if approved, how much would the merger raise HHI by? Well, if it starts out above it, then it's not necessarily that the merger is having it cross that line.
Okay.
So I think that's more important than.
Yes.
I mean, I get that. Yeah. So yes, yes. But we also want to calculate. I mean, this question is mostly to have you really thinking about if you don't have all the information, how can you, if you don't have all the information to calculate the HHI for each one and look at the difference, how can you calculate the change in HHI given limited information? So I'm going to freeze this, and then I'm going to work on a solution. Freeze it. You guys know. You guys get 528? So, tried to write it out a few different ways for you. So our change in the HHI, it's still 10,000, right? And then we're going to look at the new firm concentration squared, and then subtract the old first firm's concentration squared, and also subtract the old second firm's concentration squared. Yes. 528. 528. Yeah. So, and this is really confusing. I'm so sorry. That's all. This is all part of one equation. Get better about running out of room. But does that make sense? But we're not given the QT, right? And we're not even given the Q1 and Q2. But what are we given? We're given the weights, right? We're given the the concentrations. So we can just plug those in, and we can assume that, you know, if one of their market shares 0.22, the other one's 0.12, then the new company would have a market share of 0.34. So we take 10,000, we times it by 0.34 squared. Well, actually, no. We take 0.34 squared, we subtract 0.22 squared, then we subtract 0.12 squared, then we times all of that by 10,000. And that gives us 5.2. So the order of operations is crucial here in terms of we've got to evaluate all these minus signs before we evaluate this multiplication, because of why the P in PEMDAS, right? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, the parentheses. So we always evaluate the parentheses first. So these parentheses surrounding this, there should be a parentheses over here. Just not good at finishing page. But it's very important. You'll get the wrong answer if you don't evaluate that. So since the post-merger HHI is greater than, I said 250, but I meant 2,500, and the change in the HHI is greater than 200, as a result, they're going to get in the way. Right? It's going to be challenged by the government. So let's take the elasticities in table 7-4 and calculate the 7-4, not 7-3. So it wants us to have some practice calculating the Rothschild index. So any questions on this one though before we move on? No? Okay, good. All right, so 17 is essentially, it wants us to do the Rothschild index for table 7-4. And so I'll freeze this again for y'all once I did. Okay. So you guys remember the formula for the Rothschild index or whatever? The own price elasticity, or sorry, the total elasticity, the total own price elasticity for the whole market divided by your own elasticity for the firm. So the firm one goes on the denominator. So remember, the Rothschild index provides a measure of the sensitivity to the price of a product group as a whole relative to the sensitivity of the quantity demanded of a single firm to the change in the price, right? So when the elasticity of demand for an individual firm is much, so let's say the price index is 1, the demand curve that the firm faces is exactly the same as the firm's demand curve. When the elasticity So when the Rothschild index is close to 0, the elasticity of demand for an individual firm is much greater than the elasticity of the market demand. And so then when an elasticity is close to 1, then that's going to be more of a monopoly position, right? So the closer to 0 we get, the more competition there is, and the closer to 1 we get, the more of the industry resembling a monopoly is, right? So we're asked in this question about which of these in this whole table is the most monopoly-like or perfect competition-like. And so wholesale, oh, sorry, unfreeze. Wholesale at 0.938 is the most monopoly-like. And then finance at 0.018 is the most perfect competition-like. And I mean, there's large barriers to entry to get into wholesaling. You know, there's large startup costs. You know, large warehouses that you have to buy. A lot of room for to lose a lot of money, right? Steel wholesalers and stuff like that. They've just been hemorrhaging money because all the steel that they bought when the tariffs were really high, and so they bought the steel that they imported was really expensive. And now they're trying to sell it, but the steel prices have come down. So in order to be competitive with everybody else, they have to drop the prices to below what they paid for them. Why would they be doing that? Well, as long as they can recoup some of their fixed costs, it makes sense, right? As long as they're above that shutdown point, it makes sense for them to stay in operation rather than close down and have to pay, rent on all the warehouses and have to pay, leasing on all the equipment and stuff that they have, right? Like that, those fixed costs oftentimes are, very large, and that's a big reason why firms will stay producing even when they're technically in the red, because if they're able to cover their fixed costs and some of their variable costs, then making negative $400 is better than making, it's better than closing shop and losing $7,000 every month, right? $400 of loss is better than $7,000. So, all right, cool. I ranted for most of today. So if you have questions on the rest of Chapter 7, email me. I'll make some videos and throw them up onto YouTube. I had fun ranting. Everybody seemed amused with G, so I apologize for wasting your time, G. Maybe you're just not very expressive. Maybe you just listen with rapt attention. Sorry if it was boring. Oh, you're just tired? That makes sense. Jeez.